Hello, my name is Pooja. Welcome to the Sunday special episode of Around the World. In this special program, we inform you about the news which enhances your understanding of global politics. We will discuss one such news in today's story. History suggests that multilateralism is the most efficient path to global stability and economic progress. If the establishment of the United Nations was not initiated by dozens of countries, or dozens of countries would not have participated in it, then it would have been a Herculean task to establish peace in the world after the Second World War. However, at present, some international economic organizations do not follow multilateralism. The major players of these organizations do not want the backward countries of the world to be a part of them. As a result, these backward countries remained backward. We are referring to the G7 and G20 groups, and the countries that have been left out of these organizations are African countries. After looking at the member countries of these two organizations, you will find that the Western countries dominate them. All 7 countries of the G7 are also included in the G20. Even a forum like the European Union has made its presence felt in the G20. However, there is a region that has so far been deprived of being included in these major economic groups. We are talking about the African Union continent, which has not yet achieved a large share in these major economic groups, although South Africa is a member of the G20. But this representation is very low for the African region. Now a question arises that why we are discussing this issue with you today. We are discussing this issue with you today because India, which is a member of the G20, will take over the presidency of the G20. At present, Indonesia is the president of the G20 group. However, India will be the president of the G20 group from December 2022 to November 2023. In such a situation, discussions have started that whether India will try to give proper representation to Africa while being the president of the G20. Against this backdrop, a question arises that why India is being expected to make a place for Africa in the G20. We will analyze this question in today's story. We will also understand that why G20 needs Africa and why Africa needs G20. Let us first understand the G20 group. The G20 group was established in September 1999. The group has a total of 20 members, including 19 countries and the European Union. This group represents about 80% of the world's GDP, 75% of world trade, and more than 60% of the world's population. Since there are 27 member countries of the European Union, out of which France, Germany, and Italy are also individual members of the G20. Therefore, the G20 represents 43 countries, or about a quarter of the member of the United Nations. South Africa is the only African country out of all the 43 members of the G20. At the same time, the African Union is sometimes invited to G20 as a guest. However, the inclusion of South Africa shows Africa's presence in this significant organization. However, this presence is insufficient for such a large continent. If South Africa is excluded, then 96% of Africa's population and 85% of its GDP are deprived of any representation in G20. The African continent is home to 1.4 billion people, and this population is roughly equal to that of China or India. In addition, the combined economy of all the African countries would be the 8th largest economy in the world. In such a scenario, the G20 is compromising its effectiveness by leaving out such a large part of humanity and the world economy. If the G20 makes the African Union its member, then this group will represent the views of 55 additional members, large sections of low-income countries, and about 80% of the world's population. Furthermore, Africa is a comparatively poor continent. The large population of this continent is backward. It is a sensitive region which requires cooperation and development. As we know that South Africa is the only African country which is a member of an economic group like the G20. Therefore, the rest of the African countries are not able to reap the economic benefits provided by this organization. If the African Union becomes a member of the G20, then it is more likely that a large part of Africa will become economically stronger. The same thing applies to other G20 countries as well. If the African Union becomes a member of the G20, then the rest of the countries will be able to gain more from Africa. Africa is a treasure trove of natural resources and energy, and the world needs it. Another pertinent question arises at this juncture that why India should take the initiative of making the African Union a member of the G20. What will India gain from this move? Actually, the development of Africa is a fundamental requirement for India's foreign policy goals. India has always been a vocal supporter of Africa's inclusion in multilateral organization. Emphasizing on India's position recently, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said that India believes that Africa's growth and progress are essential for global rebalancing. This sentiment gains prominence at a time when the world is witnessing sharp polarization between democracies led by the US and authoritarian regimes led by China. On the other hand, the world is facing the adverse effects of the Russia-Ukraine war and challenges of rising fuel and food prices, financial instability, and energy crises. Furthermore, India's relations with Africa in recent years have been very steady and well-ordered. The growing role of Africa in Indian foreign and economic policy is evident in India's growing diplomatic efforts, which currently covers 43 African countries. The following figures reflect India's efforts in Africa. India has given a line of credit of about $12.37 billion to African countries. India is doing about $90 billion of trade with African countries. India's cumulative investment in Africa is around $74 billion, which makes India the fifth largest investor in Africa. In addition, India imports about 18% of its crude oil from Africa, especially from countries like Nigeria, Angola, and South Sudan. The African continent is also the source of 20% of India's coal needs. India imports about 90% of cashew nuts and phosphate from Africa. India's entire fertilizer industry is based on the product imported from countries like Morocco, Tunisia, and Senegal. Besides, India-Africa relations are very strong in the capacity building and skill development sector. Out of the 50,000 scholarships offered by India in 2015, more than 32,000 scholarships were granted to the African nationals. Under these scholarships, they were admitted to graduate and postgraduate courses in Indian institutions. It suggests that Africa is a major partner of India in many ways. India is making efforts to collaborate with Africa and contribute in its development. The African continent is one of the fastest growing regions of the world, which is full of economic, cultural, and linguistic diversity. Furthermore, Africa also intends to increase cooperation with India. Africa has also historically been associated with India. If India succeeds in making Africa a member of the G20, then a huge investment market will be created for India. Then, India will be able to give a befitting reply to the Chinese challenges in Africa. However, India's presidency in the G20 is about to come at a difficult time. Tensions between the US and China peaked after Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. Chinese ships and jets are violating borders in the Taiwan Strait. On the other hand, Russia's attack on Ukraine is still going on. Amid all these challenges, India's presidency of the G20 will not be easy. However, it is equally true that India has taken several positive steps in its endeavor to enhance its partnership with Africa. Therefore, India should leave no stone unturned to make the African Union a permanent member of the G20 under its presidency, and it should strive hard to seize this African opportunity. Now, we come to the next segment of the Sunday special episode of Around the World. In this segment, we will talk about other significant international news. Recently, Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, passed away. He was born in Russia's southern Stavropol region and had played an instrumental role in ending the Cold War and transforming East-West relations. From 1985 to 1991, he was in power in the Soviet Union. Gorbachev, who dreamt of changing the future of the Soviet Union, made two reforms during his tenure. The first reform was glasnost, that is, freedom of expression, and the second reform was perestroika, that is, restructuring. Notably, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for these efforts in 1990. South American countries, Colombia and Venezuela, seem to be getting closer these days. Recently, both the countries have restored their bilateral diplomatic relations after a gap of 3 years. The announcement of restoring bilateral diplomatic relations was made by Colombia's new leftist president Gustavo Petro and Venezuela's socialist president Nicolas Maduro on 11 August 2022. The bilateral ties between these two countries, sharing a long border of about 2,200 km, came to an end in 2019. At that time, the then Venezuelan government had accused Colombia of violating the Venezuelan border. After the leftist leader Gustavo Petro became the president of Colombia, it was being speculated that the relations between the two neighbors will improve. Recently, the results of the presidential elections were declared in the African country of Angola. Angola's ruling party won these elections. João Lourenço, leader of the ruling People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, was declared the winner of the presidential elections. In these elections, he took a lead of about 8% over his opposition party. Angola, which shares its coastline with the Atlantic Ocean, it is located in the southwestern part of Africa. It shares its borders with the Republic of Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Zambia, and Namibia. Japan is showing interest in African countries these days. Recently, the 8th Tokyo International Conference on African Development was held in Indonesia. At the conference, Japan announced financial assistance of $30 billion for developing Africa. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida also promised grain shipments to Africa. He pledged to strengthen Africa's food security in the next 3 years. He also stressed on making Africa a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Moreover, he stated that Japan will appoint a special envoy for the Horn of Africa, suffering from drought for a long time. Japan wants to reduce Chinese influence in Africa with these efforts. Now, let's note down today's question. How will India benefit from making the African Union a permanent member of an economic group like the G-20? Thank you so much for watching.